Welcome to our community. Susie Thomas with you this morning, and so excited to welcome Erin Brown Thomas to the studio via the phone. Good morning, Erin.
Good morning.
Full disclosure, Erin is my awesome daughter-in-law who is producing and editing and directing and writing all kinds of really awesome things out in Hollywood, California. And you've got a new project going on with someone near and dear to my heart. What's going on?
I do. I just produced and shot a film called Shedding with your son, Jake Thomas, who wrote and directed. This is Jake Thomas's first feature-length film. He's done a lot of shorts, but this is our first feature together, and we're really excited about it.
There's just so many directions I want to go right now. Recently, you were on the program, and we love having you on because you are a homegrown girl from our community, grew up in Akron, Ohio, now living and actually making a living out in California, which they say is difficult to do, but you always manage, Erin, to have an exciting project going on. First of all, before we get into all the stuff about shedding, which I can't wait, tell me a little bit about how does a Christian woman make it and be so successful in Hollywood, California?
Well, I think Hollywood in many ways is, there's a stigma about it, but it's really like anywhere else. There's parts of it's a culture. Mm-hmm. And parts of the culture are really good, and parts of the culture are flawed. And I think, after living here a while, that's the sort of thing you realize, and you kind of get to reflect on all the different places you've lived in your life. I spent a lot of time in Northeast Ohio. I also spent some time overseas, and so I think really you just need to find the people who are seeking truth. You need to find the people who are seeking the Lord, and just be constantly. Stay humble, look to better yourself, look to constantly evaluate, what messages am I believing, what messages am I believing that are lies, what have I newly learned to be true. God's truth doesn't change, but the way we see it does, that's part of, maturing and growing. So I think just being able to keep community in a culture that's different than the one you grew up in, you start learning those things. And with Hollywood, there's obviously a big emphasis on celebrityism, and people say that Hollywood is a lot like high school, just, high school on steroids. So all the insecurities that come with wanting to be popular, all the insecurities of, feeling either like you have to prove yourself, or you have to, the pressures of timelines and things like that. That's what people say about Hollywood. So it's just being able to have people that kind of speak into your life and say, well, you may be falling prey to this sort of cultural myth right now that is not a kingdom myth. So I would say that's what it is. But I will say that, like, there are beautiful people in Hollywood. There are beautiful people who are seeking God, who are living missionally. I'd say 90% of the Christians out here think of themselves as missionaries because they realize even if they're making, jobs in entertainment or in music or fashion or something, they realize that they have a sense of calling. That's why they came out here. And part of that sense of calling is their identity, which is in Christ. So it all kind of comes together.
I definitely think of you and Jake in that group. This seems to be a mission field for you. Is that what you think?
Absolutely. And the church that we go to in Hollywood, there's a lot of emphasis on that. We've even been doing a special group this past year that's really helping us to, our pastor's leading it, and there's like 20 of us in the church that are going through it. And it's just thinking about how to use every moment at living missionally, and think of all of your relationships as the context into which God has put you as a missionary. And that is not simply just telling them about the king, but it's bringing the kingdom. Because I think there's a lot of emphasis on, like, let me tell you about Jesus, let me tell you about Jesus. But then, like, I'm not going to make your life better here on earth. that's what heaven's for. And so I think one of the things you realize out here with all the progressivism, whether you respond to that or not, there is something good about all these movements within, I would say young New York and LA culture to, stop pollution in the world and all these other things that are really important.
And
that
treat
are,
each other respectfully. And
exactly, like being stewards of what God's given us. So there's a lot of focus in the churches out here in joining in the good things that God's doing through people who might not even recognize him or pray to him, but joining alongside them and allowing that to be the catalyst.
Yeah, that's a really good point. He can use anything, can't he? You're blowing people's mind right now by mentioning the Christians in Hollywood, because here in the middle, a lot of folks would say, what? There are Christians in Hollywood? Address that a little bit. Yes, go ahead. Talk about it.
Sure. I mean, there's many. I mean, I've been going to the same church for 11 years. I found it 3 days after I moved out to LA back in, early 2007. I think I moved out like January 1st or 2nd, 2007, and
Wow.
2 days later found this church, and I've gone pretty much every Sunday since. And we are one of many churches in Hollywood. Hollywood is actually, it's so interesting because a lot of the churches in LA are in Hollywood because God has really strongly put Hollywood not just as an area of land, but as an idea, a concept, because people think of Hollywood as not only a place, but also a mindset or a mentality or, showbiz in general. So there's a lot of people out here that feel really called here. And I'm talking, there's a lot of Christians in Hollywood.
Yeah.
There are a lot, and they're faithful, and
doing some good work.
They need your prayer and support.
There
thank
you.
For sure.
Yes, and we must be mindful of that, to keep people who have been called to the mission field in Hollywood that have such an impact on culture, because you're using such a powerful medium of film and television and communication arts. It's a powerful, powerful medium, and people who have been called to that, we need to keep in prayer. That's that you're covered in it every day. Well, you just know, between you and me, it's coming from this gal, because, you guys are always on my mind and in my prayers. You have a very unique story that you're telling right now. You're producing, Jake wrote it, and how fun to work together on a project together as husband and wife, but also as colleagues and creative partners. So talk a little bit about that, how this came about, how Shedding came about.
Well, Shedding, as you might suspect, is a film about an animal, specifically about a cat. Jake and I have cats out here in LA. We have 3, which does result in a lot of hair that we clean up every day. But a couple of years ago, Jake started filming the cats, just kind of wondering if he could ever get a story put together with them. And, he would film them when they would be doing things in good light. So not all the footage was usable, but sometimes they would sit by the window and look out the window at the perfect time of day where the lighting was just so, or he'd catch them kind of playing with each other, fighting or just, drinking water out of the bowl. And when he was able to, get a good shot in that had nice framing and stuff, he started looking through the footage and started coming up with this idea for a film. And eventually, as he, edited 7 or 8 minutes of what ends up being the beginning of this narrative, he realized he had this idea for a feature. And he brought me in, and I had just done some work with an actor named Lex Quarterman, who played an ape in a film that went to Sundance, interestingly enough.
Cool.
Lex has just an incredible talent for playing creatures and for playing animals. And so Jake talked to Lex and said, do you want to work with me and Aaron again? Because Lex was in Hotwire, a short film that Jake and I did together years ago.
Yeah.
And Lex he pitched Lex this idea of a cat that becomes a human and goes out into the world. And Lex was totally on board. And so at that point, Jake started writing the film, and then he wrote it over time, and then we eventually shot it, and we self-financed it up to this point. We shot on weekends. We taught ourselves to do things that we don't normally do. We got a couple friends to volunteer here and there. We used locations that we had available to us. And keep in mind, like an indie feature film, an average budget for an indie feature film is like a couple $1 million.
Yeah.
And like a small budget, they say if you can do it like for under 100,000, that's like very rare, right?
Right.
So we've done this film just out of like slowly over time for just a couple $1,000s. But we did that by teaching ourselves to do everything. Yeah. We did the sound. I shot it. I did the camera work. There's a nonprofit in Hollywood. It's a missional nonprofit named Epiphany Space that opened up a lot of locations to us, which was so wonderful. So it was just this thing that we did slowly together. But yeah.
So what's hard to believe is to think that something that is being able to be done on a very modest budget, shot, some of it shot on a phone, right? Watching the cats, that something like that could be a quality feature film, and yet it can. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Well, there's this saying in Hollywood, you know, if you are working in film production, you'll hear this all the time. They say fast, cheap, and good. You're guaranteed one, and if you're lucky, you get two, but you'll never get three. So we knew that we needed it. Good was the most important. And it's not good. We believe that it's excellent. It's much more than good. We're very, very proud of this film.
Yeah.
But we knew that we would just need to do it slowly if we wanted to do it the way we wanted to. And the thing is that we could have gone early out for investment money, but this was such a unique film with a unique vision, and we really wanted to, for our first big film together, voice was really important. Defining voice, letting it be something personal, not having somebody with an outside agenda come in and say, this is how this film needs to be. Because that happens a lot of times. The more money there is, the more strings are involved, especially if you're at the beginning of your career. You know, if you're Martin Scorsese and you've made a bunch of movies and you say, I have vision for something, trust me, people tend to trust him, right?
Right.
But, you know, when you're a little younger, sometimes you really have to prove yourself, and sometimes that means doing things your own way. That doesn't mean, you know, not listening, not having mentors and people that you trust, but being able to have enough control of the final product. So that was part of it. I'll also say that the way in which we made the film, we used iPhones. The iPhone, we bought special equipment or made special equipment to use with our iPhones. We did really cool things where we would like go get a board from Home Depot, like an 8-foot board that's like forgive me for not knowing the actual like 1 by whatever.
Yeah, that's okay.
Like, yeah, it was like a foot wide, a flat 1 foot wide board that was like 8 foot long. And we had this tiny little dolly that we'd put our phone on, and we would just lift like one end of the board by like a centimeter, and we'd get this nice, smooth tracking shot.
Oh, my
gosh. We
gosh.
did things like that. We just were inventive of ways of getting movement out of the shots, or, you know, we got this little Steadicam thing that we would be able to do handheld stuff with so that it would look really smooth. And we actually started shooting this before a movie called Tangerine came out, but like 2 years ago, maybe 3, a film called Tangerine came out that went to Sundance, and that was shot on the iPhone.
Shot on
and
a
then
phone.
This past year, Steven Soderbergh did a film that he released, and he's a big-time director. He did a film called Unsane on the iPhone. So if you have the skill set to shoot really good composition, if you're very thoughtful about the way you do it and you have natural talent, you can film a movie on your iPhone, especially, and it also depends on the story, right? If we were trying to film the Avengers on the iPhone, it just wouldn't work. It's the wrong camera for the Avengers.
No, it's a beautifully shot, beautifully told story. We need to take a short break. We're going to come back with Erin and more about shedding after these words. You're listening to Our Community.